Hello, my name is Sydney McMiniman, and I'm going to be talking about the myth that goes along with behavior clip charts. Here is an example of a behavior clip chart. Most students begin on the ready for the day, the green in the middle, and they can either move up or down depending on their behavior through the day. So good behavior increases their movement up, and poor behavior increases their movement down. My personal opinion on this is that behavior clip charts should not be used. And this is mostly because once you're moving that clip downward, you are getting into a punishment state of mind, which usually does not help students. In my opinion, reinforcement is much more effective than punishment. And there are so many different behavior management techniques that you can use other than this clip chart. So why should you tear your clip chart down? Behavior charts and similar public shaming methods don't teach self-regulation. They mainly harm vulnerable learners. So long-term goal, you want to think about your long-term goal when you're doing this. And your long-term goal is not to teach compliance, which is what these charts are doing. You want to teach your students to enjoy learning and enjoy the learning process, rather than just complying with day-to-day instruction. You also want to teach self-regulation. And simply rewarding or punishing behaviors doesn't teach students how to self-regulate. What happens is once the student gets moved downward on the chart, they're most likely pegged as the bad kid. And that kid that's going to be on the red per se today is most likely going to be on the red multiple days in a row, which again isn't really helping behaviors, but also leads me into my number 3, which is hurting versus helping students. And when a kid is consistently on red and pegged as the bad kid, we're changing their inner voice, and they're going to start thinking that they're a bad kid as well, which isn't going to increase the behaviors that we want from them. It's just going to remind them that we think they're a bad kid. They're most likely going to hear these things from their parents too, which is something we do not want as we are teaching young kids. How the clip chart works. Moving the clip upward goes into positive reinforcement, which means adding things in usually to increase the behavior you want. It also gives intrinsic motivation. Usually that's the autonomy of feeling good about what you've done and having your own sense of self, knowing you're able to do these things well and get rewarded for them. Moving the clip downward usually leads into negative punishment, such as taking things away like recess or free time or something like that. It can lead to negative reinforcement, which isn't necessarily bad, but generally it's the negative punishment where we're trying to get a kid to stop interrupting or something like that by taking away recess or something along those lines. So reinforcement, again, is used to get a student to increase a behavior. So to pick out a reinforcement for a student, especially if you're doing individual reinforcers, you want to observe the student. Each student's going to have something that's going to get them to do the behavior a little extra that won't work the same for another kid. You could also consider using a whole class system, such as the marbles in the jar, where if you notice one person doing well, they can put marbles in this jar and the whole class contributes. So once the jar gets full, the whole class gets a reward. And both positive and negative reinforcements are extremely useful. So positive reinforcements is something like, I'm going to give you extra free time because you were working super hard in class. Or a negative reinforcement could be something like, oh, I gave out extra homework today, but you, Johnny, were working super hard, so I'm going to make sure you don't have to do that extra homework assignment because I want you to keep working hard. Both of those can be extremely useful and generally more effective than punishment.